The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. Known as Spain's first recorded serial killer, in 1853, Manuel Blanco Romasanta, also known as the Werewolf of Allariz, admitted to 13 murders, but claimed that he was not responsible because he was cursed to be a werewolf. Born on the 18th of November 1809 in Reguero, Esgos, Orense province of Spain, Manuel's life was complicated from the start. His mother had a difficult birth and he suffered from genetic abnormalities. According to sources, he was originally named Manuela due to having androgynous gender, and his parents believed him to be female. For the first 6 years of his life, society treated him as a female until a doctor discovered his growing penis. While pundits surmise how this affected Manuel's adulthood, there is no hard evidence that this event affected his future criminal nature. Being part of a well-off and privileged family, Romasanta knew how to read and write at a time when only a few adults could. In his early teens, his growth stopped and he stood between 4'6" and 4'11". As an adult, he worked as a dressmaker and was married. He was widowed a year later but was not suspected of having had a hand in her death. Following the death of his wife in 1833, Romasanta became a traveling salesman, initially in Esgos, then eventually throughout Galicia and Portugal. He left the job to start a new life and became a traveling salesman. He also worked as a travel guide for people traveling through the mountains of Castile, Asturias, and Cantabria. However, his life took a bad turn when he was struck with murder charges in 1844. Romasanta was charged with the murder of Vicente Fernandez, the alguacil of Leon. Fernandez was found dead after attempting to collect a debt of 600 real that Blanco owed to a supplier in Ponferrada for the purchase of merchandise. Romasanta fled with a false passport and didn't appear for his trial. He was assumed guilty and given a prison sentence of 10 years in his absence. Romasanta lived in hiding for almost a year in an abandoned shelter in Elmida, but eventually he returned to his hometown with a false passport using the name Antonio Gomez, a native of Nogueira, Portugal, and lived in the small village of Verdadechao in the district of Villar de Badio for at least a year. He used a close-by village as his hideout for a while and continued to make a living by befriending local women and working as a guide to newcomers in town. He became friendly with the women of the village, which led the man to consider him effeminate. Things once again turned grim when quite a few women and children connected to Romasanta had mysteriously disappeared. Several newcomers, including 7 women and 2 children traveling with their mothers, were never seen again. Their disappearances were not noticed immediately, as Blanco delivered letters to their families, letting them know that they had arrived well at their destinations and were settling in. However, people became suspicious when they noticed that he was selling his victims' clothing locally. But the final piece linking Romasanta came in September of 1852. The town was in shock when a complaint was filed accusing Romasanta of using his victims' body fat to make soap to sell to the public. Investigating authorities confirmed the case and, justified with the other pieces of evidence, set out to arrest Romasanta. He was arrested in September 1852 in Nombela, in the province of Toledo, and brought to trial in Allariz, in the area of Orense, for the murders of 13 people from age 10 to 47. In his defense, Blanco claimed that he was afflicted with lycanthropy. Authorities asked Romasanta to prove his lycanthropy curse by transforming in front of the court. He explained that it was a 13-year curse and that it had conveniently expired a week prior. Unable to prove his claim, Romasanta was examined by various physicians, none of whom could find causes of his illness and attributed the crimes to voluntary actions. The court acquitted Romasanta of 4 of the murders he had confessed to after forensic evidence indicated that these victims had died in real wolf attacks. He was found guilty of the other 9, the remains of which exhibited signs of butchering. On April 6, 1853, Romasanta was sentenced to death by garrote with 1,000 real compensation to be paid for each victim. The court case had lasted 7 months, and the transcript covered more than 2,000 pages which were bound in 5 volumes titled Lycanthropia. Nevertheless, Romasanta's death sentence was overturned on the claim of Mr. Phillips, a French hypnotist. He requested the Spanish Minister of Justice to delay the sentence, claiming that Romasanta could be suffering from monomania, a mental disorder that can be treated with hypnotism. Eventually, on May 13, 1854, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment by royal decree. Romasanta was sent to a prison in Salanova, where he died behind bars on December 14, 1863. Locals say the cause of death was stomach cancer, but a persisting rumor suggests he was shot by a guard who saw him transform into a wolf. Mary Ann Cotton was a British serial killer in the 19th century. Employing poison, she is suspected of murdering up to 21 people. She was the most prolific British serial killer before Harold Shipman. She may have murdered as many as 21 people, including 11 of her 13 children. She chiefly used arsenic poisoning, causing gastric pain and rapid decline of health. She was born Mary Ann Robson in 1832 in the village of Low Morsley in Tyne Wear, northern England. Her father was a miner who died when she was 8, and Mary and her brother were raised by their mother. As the miner's cottage they inhabited was tied to Michael's job, the widow and children would have been evicted. In 1843, her mother married George Stott, also a miner, whom Mary is said to have hated. Conflict with her stepfather led her to flee the family home when she was 16. In 1852, at the age of 20, Mary Ann married William Mowbray and had 5 children, 4 of whom died in infancy, a high rate of infant mortality even in the Victorian era. None of these deaths are registered, although registration was compulsory at that time. The law was not enforced until 1874. The only birth recorded was that of their daughter, Margaret Jane, born at St. Germans in 1856. William died of an intestinal disorder in January 1865. The lives of William and of their children were insured by the British and Prudential Insurance Office, and Mary Ann collected a payout of £35 on William's death, equivalent to £4 or $426.50 in 2020, about a half year's wage for a manual laborer at that time, and about £2 for John Robert William. Now widowed, Mary returned to Sunderland and a few months later got married again. Her new husband, George Ward, was one of her patients in the infirmary. Ward continued to suffer ill health and died on October 20, 1866, after a long illness characterized by paralysis and intestinal problems. The cause of death recorded on his death certificate is that of English cholera and typhoid. The attending doctor later gave evidence that Ward had been very ill, yet he had been surprised that his death was so sudden. Once again, Mary Ann collected insurance money in respect of her husband's death. In 1866, Mary's mother died after a sudden illness. At that time, Mary was enjoying a relationship with a widower, James Robinson, whom she soon married. Robinson had 4 children by his late wife, although 2 suddenly died soon after he met Mary. Robinson married Mary Ann at St. Michael's, Bishop Wearmouth on August 11, 1867. Their first child, Margaret Isabella, was born that November, but she became ill and died in February 1868. Their second child, George, was born on June 18, 1869. Robinson, meanwhile, had become suspicious of his wife's insistence that he insure his life. He discovered that she had run up debts of 60 pounds behind his back and had stolen more than 50 pounds that she had been expected to bank. Then he found that Mary Ann had been forcing his older children to pawn household valuables. He threw her out, retaining custody of their son George. He was the only husband to survive a marriage to her. In 1870, Mary married another widower, Frederick Cotton, whose surname she took, and by which name she is usually known, even though the marriage was effectively null and void because Mary had not legally divorced her previous husband. Mary Cotton had a son with Frederick Cotton. Soon, his sister, 2 sons from his previous marriage, and a number of friends died after sudden illnesses. Cotton himself died in December of that year from gastric fever. Insurance had been affected on his life and those of his sons. Soon after, Mary Ann learned that her former lover, Joseph Natras, was living 48 kilometers or 30 miles away in the country Durham village of West Oakland and was no longer married. She rekindled the romance and persuaded her new family to move near him. Mary Ann's downfall came when she was asked by a parish official, Thomas Riley, to help nurse a woman who was ill with smallpox. She complained that the last surviving Cotton boy, Charles Edward, was in the way and asked Riley if he could be committed to the workhouse. Riley, who also served as West Oakland's assistant coroner, said she would have to accompany him. She told Riley that the boy was sickly and added, "I won't be troubled long. He'll go like all the rest of the Cottons." 5 days later, Mary Ann told Riley that the boy had died. Riley went to the village police and convinced the doctor to delay writing a death certificate until the circumstances could be investigated. Mary Cotton had told him that Charles had been in the way of her plans of getting remarried. Furthermore, young Charles had appeared to be very healthy up until his sudden death, which was supposedly due to gastric fever. Mary Ann's first visit after Charles' death was not the doctor, but the insurance office. There, she discovered that no money would be paid out until a death certificate was issued. An inquest was held, and the jury returned a verdict of natural causes. Mary Ann claimed to have used arrowroot to relieve his illness and said Riley had made accusations against her because she had rejected his advances. Then the local newspapers latched onto the story and discovered Mary Ann had moved around northern England and lost 3 husbands, a lover, a friend, her mother, and 11 children, all of whom had died of stomach fevers. Rumor turned to suspicion and forensic inquiry. The doctor who attended Charles had kept samples and they tested positive for arsenic. He went to the police, who arrested Mary Ann and ordered the exhumation of Charles's body. She was charged with his murder, although the trial was delayed until after the delivery of her last child in Durham Gaol on January 10, 1873, whom she named Margaret Edith Quake Manning Cotton. On March 24, 1873, Mary Ann was led to the scaffold where the elderly hangman misjudged the logistics of the execution. So instead of dying quickly, Mary Ann struggled after the trapdoor was released, and it took at least 3 minutes for her to be slowly and painfully strangled by the noose, slowly choking to her death. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twysted Mind and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat!